Under the first light of dawn, the Sahel sky burns in shades of amber and gold. The city of Ouagadougou stirs awake, not to the sound of traffic, but to the rhythm of transformation. 1,000 newly built buses, painted in the proud colors of red, green, and gold, glide through the streets like a moving flag. Their engines hum softly, not as machines, but as the heartbeat of a nation reclaiming its rhythm. No foreign insignias mark their sides. No global lender's logo decorates their frames. Every bus is a quiet declaration. Burkina Faso is moving on its own terms. For decades, nations like this were told that progress must be borrowed. That mobility was a privilege purchased with interest, and that dreams could only roll forward on foreign credit. But this morning, the roads of Ouagadougou tell a different story. The old chains of dependency now lie broken across the asphalt. President Ibrahim Traoré's administration didn't sign loans or chase donors. Instead, it redirected the flow of its own resources, nearly $80 million from gold and agricultural exports, to build a fleet entirely funded by Burkinabè hands. No IMF paperwork, no hidden contracts, just a nation choosing dignity over debt. Each bus that rolls forward carries a piece of that decision. The metal may gleam, but its real shine lies in the idea behind it: independence that drives itself. Across the capital, the atmosphere is electric. School children wave miniature flags, market vendors pause to watch, and miners, the very people whose hands dug the gold that made this possible, raise their fists in pride. "This is ours," one of them says, his voice trembling between disbelief and hope, because for the first time, mobility is not imported, it's owned. This is not a story about war, nor about rebellion in arms. It's a quieter revolution, one that runs on wheels. The people of Burkina Faso are no longer waiting for permission to move. They are steering their own future. For decades, infrastructure projects in Africa came stamped with signatures from foreign capitals, loans tied to conditions, policies shaped by outsiders. But now something historic is happening. For the first time in Burkina Faso's modern history, a major national project has been launched without a single foreign loan.
It's Africa's misfortune, if I may say so.
It wasn't a miracle. It was a decision under Traore's directive. Over $82 million from gold and cotton revenues, resources, that once slipped quietly into foreign markets have been rechanneled back home. Those funds are now fueling schools, fuel depots, and transport systems, all within national borders.
The 1,000 bus initiative is more than just public transport. It's a declaration, a manifesto of economic sovereignty. Every bolt tightened, every seat assembled, and every brushstroke of paint represents a line in a new kind of independence. Not from colonizers, but from dependency itself. This shift is subtle but seismic. Sovereignty in Africa is no longer just a speech delivered at Independence Day celebrations. It's becoming a budget line, a policy, a practice. By managing its own gold reserves, Burkina Faso saves nearly $25 million annually, money that once vanished in export markups and hidden fees. Today, that same amount keeps the nation's wheels turning. Each bus, each route, each journey is a lesson in self-determination. They are more than vehicles. They are classrooms on wheels, teaching the continent what it means to move freely. And as these engines hum through the capital, the world watches and wonders. If a country at war, landlocked and written off by economists, can rise without borrowing, then what excuse remains for those who still kneel before lenders? Skeptics around the world asked the same question. How long can this last? Can a landlocked nation surrounded by instability really sustain itself without foreign loans or aid? In Ouagadougou, the answer doesn't come from speeches or financial reports. It comes from sound, from the quiet roar of engines each morning. Thousands of buses start together, carrying students to schools, doctors to hospitals, and farmers to markets. Each wheel that turns is a reply to decades of doubt. Operating costs are covered not by donors, but through domestic fuel taxes and gold revenue. It's a simple reinvestment model. Money made in Burkina Faso stays in Burkina Faso. The project now generates more than $4 million each month, reinvested directly into maintenance, expansion, and worker salaries. No bailouts, no lenders. Just a nation keeping itself in motion. And that motion speaks louder than any slogan. The same roads that once carried aid convoys and borrowed trucks are now filled with vehicles paid for by the people themselves. This is what sovereignty looks like when it becomes routine. When independence is not an anniversary, but a schedule. When the first fleet entered the capital, the sight was unforgettable. At sunrise, a moving river of red, green, and gold filled the streets. Flags waved from rooftops, drums echoed from corners, and elders stood in tears as children shouted, "Burkina Faso rises!" For the first time, national television suspended all programming. No commercials, no debates, just one moment shared by millions. A nation watching itself move forward. As the last bus entered the city square, President Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the podium. His voice carried over the noise like a verdict carved in steel. Work and discipline are worth more than foreign promises. Those words became a message, not just to his people, but to an entire continent. That morning, this was no longer about transport. It became a symbol, a reflection of what happens when self-belief meets structure. Vendors who once walked miles to reach their markets now saw freedom in movement. Students from rural outskirts found new access to education. Drivers found work, pride, and purpose. Every horn that echoed through the capital carried the same silent message: we can build, we can plan, we can pay. Burkina Faso, long dismissed as landlocked, had just proven it could also be self-unlocked. As fireworks painted the evening sky and applause filled the streets, another question began to form. What happens when one success story inspires a continent? If this is what a single project can achieve, what could Africa create if it decided to move together? Let's talk about numbers. Not as statistics, but as proof of independence. 1,000 buses, each valued at $90,000. That's $90 million in total, every cent paid from Burkina Faso's own treasury. No IMF loans. No secret donors. No signatures from abroad. The project was financed through a new sovereign mobility fund, fueled by royalties from domestic gold and a small 0.5% levy on fuel sales. Within a few months, this fund created over 6,000 new jobs: engineers, drivers, mechanics, and small vendors. For a nation once struggling with unemployment, this wasn't just a project. It was oxygen. The results spoke for themselves. The transport sector's contribution to GDP rose from just over 1% to nearly 4% in a single year. School attendance grew by more than 20%. Local trade expanded across regions. Every bus route became a new economic vein, linking villages, schools, and markets into one living network of progress. And perhaps most powerful of all, every transaction, every repair, every fare was conducted in CFA franc, the national currency, strengthening its value and the people's confidence in it. This wasn't charity. It was strategy. This wasn't luck. It was leadership. Burkina Faso proved that good governance could replace foreign credit, that gold-backed budgets could outlast promises. But the question now moves beyond numbers. It travels across the map. If one country can fund its own mobility, what else can Africa afford once it stops asking for permission? When the world first noticed the change in Burkina Faso, few understood the scale. Many called it temporary, a flash of pride in a small land. But as months turned into years, the pattern grew. Roads became arteries, buses became lifelines, and what began as a transport reform evolved into an economic pulse that reached far beyond the borders. Soon, neighboring nations started to take notice. Mali, Niger, and Chad sent delegations, not to negotiate aid, but to learn. They wanted to know how a country once dependent on foreign donations had turned its own minerals and fuel into movement. It was a question not of politics, but of process. In the government archives of Ouagadougou, the answer lies written in a single sentence: we invest in what we use. This principle reshaped everything, from agriculture to industry. Gold revenue that once left the country through multinational contracts was redirected into state-owned factories, assembly plants, and energy projects. One of the most ambitious among them was the Burkina Auto Works, a national assembly unit, designed to build and maintain the same buses that now cross the nation daily. The facility employed over 2,000 young engineers and technicians, most of whom were trained locally under a new vocational program. For the first time, production and pride shared the same factory floor. Documentaries from across Africa began to feature this project, calling it the Sahel Model, a reference to how unity and discipline could rebuild nations in one of the world's most fragile regions. And for once, the global narrative about Africa began to shift. Foreign analysts, once skeptical, now used Burkina Faso as a case study in sustainable independence. Investors who previously ignored the Sahel started to see opportunity, not in extraction, but in collaboration. President Traoré addressed this change directly in one of his speeches. We will not reject cooperation. We will redefine it. His message was clear. Partnerships were welcome, but on equal terms. No more hidden clauses, no more dependency disguised as help. Under this new vision, the Alliance of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger began coordinating shared infrastructure projects, power grids, roads, and trade routes built with their own funds. Instead of waiting for permission, they began signing mutual agreements, African contracts written in African capitals. As one commentator from Ghana said during a televised debate, "For decades, we were told we could not stand without aid. Burkina Faso didn't just stand. It walked, and then invited others to walk with it. The impact went beyond economics. The idea of self-determination started spreading among young Africans who had grown up watching their countries struggle under debt and foreign control. In universities from Dakar to Addis Ababa, students began discussing the Burkina Model as a framework for modern Pan-African progress. Even the diaspora, Africans living abroad, began to return home, bringing back skills, equipment, and investments. They didn't come back because of salaries. They came back because something was finally changing. In the capital, murals began to appear across city walls, painted in red, green, and gold, with one message repeated again and again: autonomy is the new revolution. And as night falls over Ouagadougou, the rhythm continues. Buses still running, factories still humming, and streets still alive with movement. The hum of engines has become the new anthem, a sound that tells the story of resilience turned into rhythm. Burkina Faso's story is no longer about survival. It's about structure. A nation that learned to rise without waiting to be lifted, because independence isn't a declaration, it's a decision, made every morning, renewed with every wheel that turns.